All right, hey guys, we're back. We are talking about the collective conscience today. Um, if you took intro with me, this term was referred to as the collective consciousness, which is why I have that there. I'll explain that in a moment, but let's take stock of where we are right now. We're having this lecture because in the last lecture, we saw that humans evolved a solution to the problem of dynamic density, and that solution was the division of labor. But the division of labor creates a bunch of different experiences among people, whereas we used to have very, very similar experiences, which made it possible to have a strong common morality. Remember, for Durkheim, a strong common morality is necessary to regulate people in order for them to have fulfilling lives so that they're not out just pleasure seeking all the time. So we're talking about the collective consciousness today. Either one is going to be fine. And in fact, I will probably, in the course of this lecture, use those two terms, consciousness and conscience, interchangeably. And there's a reason for that. The reason is that the word in French, which Emile Durkheim is French, the word conscience, which is probably not pronounced that way, but it's spelled that way, refers to both conscience like we would think of it, your internalized sense of right and wrong, and consciousness, your just sort of awareness of what's around you. Anyway, so I'll use those two terms interchangeably because in French the word actually means both of those things. The increasing division of labor causes a reduction in the extent of this collective consciousness. Collective consciousness is a population's shared understandings, norms, and beliefs. And so if we're having different experiences, we are going to interact with people who are having kind of similar experiences to us, but those will be different than experiences of people over here. And that means those two groups are going to have fewer things in common. They won't have nothing in common. But as compared to a society where everybody has the same experiences and everybody therefore has the same understandings, in a society with a relatively increased division of labor, as the division of labor goes up, the number of shared understandings is going to go down because people are having different experiences. The problem for us, and the reason that Durkheim is talking about this, is because the collective consciousness, this shared understanding, that's where morality exists. Morality is part of those shared understandings. Some of our understandings are, simple things about, about how we understand different natural resources or whatever, but some of them is also going to be about what is the right and wrong way to interact with people. Both of those things are understandings that you have. And so it's a problem if we don't share common understandings. Let me see what I want to talk about with regard to this. So for Durkheim, what we've got here, well, first of all, I guess let me talk about this idea of these two words, because this is kind of a fascinating, to me, this is an amazing idea that we kind of think about our daily consciousness not as exactly the same thing as our conscience. I walk through my day and I am conscious of what's going on around me, but my conscience only kind of perks up if I am put into a situation where it's possible that I will do the wrong thing. For Durkheim, that is not the right way to think about your conscience and your consciousness. For him, to be a conscious person is to have a conscience. We get both our way of understanding what's out there, our consciousness, and our sense of right and wrong. We get them both from society. They're both coming from the same place. And so distinguishing between the two of them doesn't really make sense. I personally find that to be an amazingly fascinating way of thinking about my experience in life. Every moment, my conscience actually is active. It's just usually I'm not in an experience that is going to cause me to think about, oh, am I doing the wrong thing or am I doing the right thing? The right thing has been so ingrained in me by society that to be conscious is to have my conscience limiting me in terms of what I do without me even being aware of it. That is amazingly cool. All right, but what we're talking about right now is this division of labor. Let me scroll down. Okay, so this collective consciousness, it's coming from society, and we get that by interacting with other people. That kind of makes sense. So what that means, though, is a change in the patterns of interaction. If I went from interacting with only with everybody in my society, and now I'm only interacting with these few people who have different experiences than these people over here, what that change in the pattern of interactions is going to mean is a change in the collective consciousness, a change in our ability to have a common morality. So we solve a problem with the division of labor. We solve the problem of dynamic density, but we create another problem by all of a sudden having a different kind of collective consciousness. Now, Auguste Comte, from a few lectures or a couple of weeks ago, felt as though he didn't use the term, I don't think, the collective conscience, but he had this sort of general sense of morality, and he said it's gone. The division of labor gets rid of it. Durkheim is going to be more subtle than that, more nuanced. He says it changes, but we still have one. Durkheim actually is going to find a way to think about this development, the change of the collective consciousness, in a positive way. But let's right now get at the difference, the change. So Durkheim, in a kind of a very generalized way, talks about two different types of societies: primitive society and modern society. And the way you can think about them defined is by how much division of labor there is. In a primitive society, there's not very much division of labor. If you think about hunter-gatherers, there's your division of labor. Hunters, gatherers, that's it. You think about our modern society, and you right now probably have some degree of stress about what you're going to major in because there are so many possibilities for you. So that is his sort of analytical way of thinking about societies. They either are low division of labor or high division of labor. Primitive is not very divided in terms of in terms of the division of labor, and the modern society is very. All right. So what consequences does this have for the collective conscience or consciousness? So in a primitive society, he describes, and all of these terms with the dashes after them are descriptions of the collective consciousness. So in a primitive society, it is strong, very intense, rigid, religious, and involves repressive law. Let me talk about each of those in turn. A primitive society, to say it has a strong collective consciousness is to say that just about everybody in the society holds the same beliefs. That's what that means. A strong collective consciousness is one in which just about everybody holds almost all beliefs the same. The example that I use in my intro classes for this is you want to think about an Amish society where everybody holds basically the same beliefs. In a modern society, the collective consciousness is relatively weak. You and I probably hold the same beliefs about equality and about freedom, but we might differ on a whole bunch of other things. We might hold different religious beliefs. We might hold different political beliefs. We might believe all kinds of different things. That wouldn't happen in a society with a strong collective consciousness. So strong, everybody holds almost all the same beliefs. Weak, everybody holds a few beliefs together, but there's a lot more diversity. Okay. In a primitive society with a strong collective consciousness, those beliefs are very intensely held. Again, to use the Amish as an example, if you say, I am not going to believe certain things, you can be expelled from the community, shunned for life, at least within some sects of Amish society. Whereas, like right now, my kids, I have two kids. If they don't hold all the same beliefs as me, I'm not going to like kick them out of the house or something. So it is less intense. I'm sorry. Did I say I started out with, very intensely held? I'm sorry. very intensely held means yeah, it's very, very powerful. Whereas our beliefs are less intensely held. You may disagree with your parents about some things, and it's not going to end your relationship. Primitive societies are rigid in the sense that if you don't hold these beliefs, you can be kicked out. In modern societies, we are more flexible about it. Oh, you started out believing the same thing that I do, but then you changed your beliefs. Okay, we can deal with that. I mean, as long as we have a few things that we hold in common, that's going to be all right. In primitive societies, religion is going to be central. That idea and we talked about Durkheim's idea of religion. It is about putting the society, even if it is sort of translated into metaphysical ideas, society is more important than anything else. But in modern society, it is more individual centered. Most of us are not willing to die for our society. Most of us think, well, in terms of my freedom, is our society, and we might have different levels where it becomes a problem, but how much is my society infringing on my freedom? That in a primitive society is not really a way that people would think about their lives. And last, in a primitive society, sorry, I just knocked the computer. In a primitive society, laws are repressive because any violation of a law is an offense against the society in general. So I talked about Amish people expelling people from society entirely. In Afghanistan, very different than Amish society. In Afghanistan, under the Taliban, if girls tried to go to school, they could be stoned to death. It was a capital offense to do that not because it hurt some individual, but because it was an offense against the society as a whole. Repressive law that put an individual in his, or in this case, her place. Whereas in modern society, laws are more restitutive. We try to make restitution. An individual has wronged another individual, and therefore an individual must do their time or pay something back, and then things get back to normal. But there's no sense there. I mean, this is kind of an ideal type situation. There obviously are cases in which we say this was a heinous crime against our society, but generally speaking, most offenses are sort of not that big of a deal. You did something wrong, and you have to pay this person back for it. Okay, that gets us to, so the division of labor has switched us from this kind of collective consciousness to that kind of collective consciousness. And there are some benefits, guy. I'm at 13 minutes. Sorry, I'm going to try to get this done in 2 minutes now. There are some advantages to this. We have the freedom to think what we want. We have the freedom to do what we want as long as it's not going to hurt somebody, without fear that we've offended our community and that we're going to be punished for an offense against our community. So there's a lot to be said for this weaker collective consciousness. But remember, that's where, in the collective consciousness or conscience, that's where our our common morality lives. And we need a strong sense of that, but in order to regulate ourselves so we can have fulfilling lives. But it's hard to have a common morality when you have so many things that are flexible and that you don't have to agree on. So what happens to this common morality when the collective consciousness weakens like that? That's it for this video. We will find out that. Durkheim is going to say, well, it's not that there's no morality, it's that we have a new kind of morality. I'll talk about that new kind of morality in the next video.